Okay, let's review this research-supported essay done in APA style. After the title, Mass Incarceration is an American Failure, comes the introduction paragraph, which serves several functions. First, it provides background context for the topic and generates reader interest. But the primary goal of the introduction paragraph is to present the thesis, which should come at or near the end of the paragraph. Jane begins. Today, the United States holds 25% of all the prisoners in the world, more than any other country on earth. Citation APA. So, Jane has a strong hook in her opening sentence, using the startling statistic strategy. Also note that this in-text citation, like all in-text citations, refers to a corresponding reference citation on the reference page at the end of the paper that provides full information on the source. Jane's next sentence adds more facts about the problems of mass incarceration, including the prison system's cost of $80 billion per year, a fact that is also cited. Then comes another sentence about additional social costs that raise the total to $1.2 trillion. Note that this second figure is cited with an in-text citation of an article that has multiple authors. Remember that in APA in-text citations, only last names are used, never first initials. Now, by providing this background about mass incarceration in America, Jane has prepared us for her thesis. Clearly, mass incarceration in the U.S. has become a financial, social, and moral failure that demands corrective action. Note the following about Jane's thesis. First, it clearly states the topic, mass incarceration, and Jane's position on the topic, a failure that demands action. Your thesis should do the same. Your reader should know exactly what the issue is and where you stand on it. Second, note that Jane mentions 3 types of failure: financial, social, and moral. These 3 words help to signal the organization of the paper, and we can expect sections on each of the 3. After the introduction paragraph comes what is called an APA Level 1 subheading or subtitle. As the name suggests, a subtitle or subheading is a phrase that describes the content of the body section that follows. If we scroll through the paper, we see that Jane uses these Level 1 subheadings to set off each section of her paper. Next is, what about rehabilitation? Followed by the third body section, the destruction of families. And then another subtitle for the conclusion, fixing the failures. Although Jane has only 1 paragraph per section, there could be multiple paragraphs that relate to this section's topic. Let's turn now to Jane's first body paragraph following the APA Level 1 subheading, A Prison the Size of Philadelphia. In this first body paragraph, Jane uses the classic formula for a body paragraph in a research-supported essay. State the main point of the paragraph in the first sentence. Explain the main point, then support the main point. And finally, conclude or wrap up the paragraph in your own words. Let's read the paragraph's stated main point. First, mass incarceration is a financial failure. So, the paragraph's main point is succinctly stated in Jane's own words. It clearly states what the paragraph must develop and support, the idea that mass incarceration is a financial failure. In the next, or explain sentence, Jane writes, "We're paying too much money to keep too many people locked up." So, in this sentence, Jane elaborates on the main point and creates a transition to the next section of the paragraph, the support section. In the support section, Jane first provides the total number of inmates, 2.3 million, and cites her source, Cable and Cowig. Then Jane comments on this statistic in her own words. But Jane is smart. She doesn't ask us to take her word for Philly's population. She provides a citation for it. Note that this citation uses a title and quote marks. Whenever your source does not list an author, either a person or an organization, Your next choice is to use an abbreviated version of the source title, in quote marks, for your in-text citation. And if we scroll to the references page, you see the full title of the source is City and Town Population Totals 2010 to 2017. Next, Jane continues in her support section by telling us that the annual $80 billion figure comes from the cost of housing a single inmate for a year. And note how these facts, which come from outside sources, also have in-text citations. However, after the support, Jane shares her own thoughts that she has formed during her research. Jane's observation is hers and needs no citation. Obviously, continuing to lead the world in locking up citizens in tax-paid facilities is not a strategy the U.S. can afford indefinitely. But because this is a research-supported essay, Jane knows she must support her own statements with research, and she does. America already incarcerates 5 times more of its citizens than any other Western democracy. Citation Walmsley, N.D. The ND stands for no date and means the source Jane found did not list a date of publication. Now, after stating her main point, explaining her main point, and supporting her main point, Jane is ready to wrap up the paragraph with her conclusion in her own words. To remain competitive, the U.S. must reverse this unsustainable approach to corrections and focus on helping inmates to return to productive lives so that they are earning $32,000 per year instead of costing that much. Notice how the conclusion refers back to the paragraph's main point, the financial failure of the mass incarceration prison system, and it also issues a challenge to change the system, which echoes her thesis. Now that's a solid body paragraph. State, explain, support, conclude. Follow that pattern in your body paragraphs, and you'll be in great shape. The next body section also begins with an APA Level 1 subheading. Then, a paragraph following that pattern. State the main point, explain the main point, support the main point, conclude the paragraph. Notice that at the beginning of this paragraph, Jane uses the transition word second. She does this to signal her organization, and then states her main point. Mass incarceration is a social failure. Her explanation sentence is also straightforward. Prisoners are not getting enough rehabilitation to transition successfully back to society. Then comes the support section. Jane discusses the role of the Bureau of Prisons and Rehabilitation. Although this role is a commonly known fact and doesn't need citation, Jane does something smart. She adds the voice of an expert to her discussion to give it authority. The sentence, rehabilitation means being committed to providing inmates with skills that aid them and their families to readjust after release back into society, is summarized from a source indicated by the Pavis in-text citation. Jane is following a common pattern that you can use. She first states something in her own words, then uses a source to back up what she said. Doing so shows that what Jane asserts is accepted by experts in this field, and therefore Jane's assertion is given credibility. Notice that only the information in that one sentence comes from Pavis. How do we know that? Because an in-text citation can apply only to the sentence it is a part of. That's why the period of the sentence always comes after the citation. Now, let's look at Jane's next 2 sentences. Most inmates come to jail with little or no education at all. Without successful intervention in the form of rehabilitation, once released, these prisoners are right back where they started. Again, due to her research and thinking on this topic, Jane has formed her own position on this issue. This position belongs to her and is expressed in her own words, no citation needed. But again, because this is a research-supported essay, Jane also knows that she must add the voices of experts for support. In this case, she chooses an article from the Atlantic Monthly written by Talbot. Let's read Talbot's quotation to see if Jane is justified in using the author's exact words to take up space in her paper. Talbot states, "Many will be drug abusers who receive no treatment for their addiction while on the inside, sex offenders who got no counseling, and illiterate high school dropouts who took no classes and acquired no job skills." Yes, that's a dramatic quote that paints a bleak picture of people who are doomed to repeat offenses due to the lack of basic help. One other thing to notice is that the quotation is introduced with the phrase Talbot 28 dates. Note that the author's name is outside the parentheses, and that's because it's being used as the subject of the verb states. However, the author's name Talbot and the publication year together still form an in-text citation. After making another assertion, it doesn't have to be this way, and backing it up with a source, Daci, Beretti, and Thompson 2016, Jane is ready to conclude this body paragraph, again in her own words. In the end, the more prisoners that are rehabilitated, the quicker they can start to contribute to society, thereby reducing prison overcrowding and the social burden it places on families and communities. So Jane ends by echoing in her own words the main point of the paragraph that she began with, the need for more rehabilitation. Jane's third body section on the destruction of families follows the same pattern: state, explain, support, conclude, and is followed by the essay's conclusion paragraph. Note that the conclusion also has its own APA Level 1 subheading. Let's now skip to the references page. In APA, references begin on a new page at the end of your paper. Type the word references on the very top line and center it. All the references that follow are double-spaced, in alphabetical order, and use hanging indentation. The basic format is author last name and first initial, publication date, source title and sentence capitalization, and that means you capitalize only the first word of the title or subtitle, and any proper noun. Then comes the publication information, if the source was a part of a larger publication, such as a journal. And finally comes the online retrieval information. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact the Effective Writing Center or use Ask a Librarian service.